How's it going? I own a little shop called Roy V Restorations, and right now we're going to work on the metal fabrication for an interior of a '67 Mustang built for Trans Am racing. I scoured the internet and couldn't really find anything that addressed this, and after a whole lot of research I've found there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but we're going to attack it the best way we know how and see what we come up with, and maybe this will be a tutorial for what you could do or maybe not do in your attempt to create this type of fabrication. So let's go. Looking inside the car, this car has already been blasted down to bare metal and epoxied, and the gray has been sprayed in the interior, trunk, engine bay, and wheel wells. There's a couple of different ways to go about this. Some of the Trans Am cars are using the original interior panels, like the one that's hanging here that I've already refinished. However, the roll cage that I'm using in this car is from Auto Power. It's a really nice first-class roll cage, but it uses the wheel well right here to attach the bars that come back from the main hoop. So I'm not going to be able to use the standard '67 interior piece. So the goal today, over the next few days, is to create a piece that covers the back area here and create pieces that cover both sides and the quarters. We want it to attach where it can be taken off. We want it to look nice, but not too nice because it was a race car. And mainly we want it to fit and not squeak or make noise as you drive around. So let's get started. I don't really have any large pieces of paper to make a template with, so I'm just going to start with where the window regulator comes through with a piece of heavy paper, and I'm going to work my way around and tape it all together and then trim it to fit, and that should give me a nice pattern. Clearly this isn't an exact science, but what I'm using is a tool that gives you radius for cutting tile, maybe around a toilet or something like that, and I'm using that to get the curvature of the wheel well, which I'll transfer over to the paper one page at a time. It should give me a nice clean cut without having to try to work that edge with a pair of scissors or an X-Acto knife. It's not quite finished yet, but it's coming along. I found that the radius of the wheel well does not change, and so once you get the first piece of the radius cut, you can use that pattern to cut the pieces to go all the way up, but you can see that it's taking shape. Well, here's the end result. I taped both sides of it real well and marked it left and right. It fits pretty well on either side. I'll have to do some minor trimming on the one that I do on the left side, but I expect to have to trim to fit anyway. So this piece of sheet metal is 18 gauge and it should take both sides. So we're going to get it taped down, marked up, and cut out and see how it fits from there. I've got both sides traced, both right and left, and the hole for the window regulator is in the right spot and is a little bit oversized, so I have a little wiggle room as I'm moving the piece around in the area to make sure it fits everywhere. And I've got a hole saw that I'm going to cut this with, but I'm going to start with a pilot of a 1/8 inch drill bit. That'll give me a good solid pilot hole to get these holes in the right spot, and then we're going to cut them out and see what we have and how they fit. Well, here's the right side after I've cut it. I have a little bit of trimming to do, and then I'll buff the edges and get rid of the super sharp corners. Then I'll have to decide exactly where that's going to attach onto the metal. The interior quarters I'm going to pop rivet into place. I've already completely rebuilt the window mechanisms behind there, and I probably won't have to get back in there again, and if I do, I can always drill out the pop rivets. I have ordered some stainless wide flange pop rivets for this purpose, and so once I get it cleaned up, it fits really well. It's just kind of hanging there, so the hole is off center, but once I get it pop riveted in, it fits perfectly, and then I'll get to work on the other side and the back piece, and then eventually we'll do a piece that covers the package tray as well and lips over into the engine compartment by about 3/4 of an inch to seal all this up really well. Behind the pieces of metal, I'm going to use some sort of a rubber strip, or I've thought about a number of different ways to go about it, but that will insulate the metal piece from the body so that it will not vibrate, it won't buzz, and because it will have some cushion, it shouldn't make noise when it hits certain harmonics as well. So that's going to fit real good, it's going to look fine, and it's going to do everything we need for it to do in a race car. I found that in order for the panel to sit flat, the tab that went right there below the window regulator opening, it has a screw hole in it that is the screw attachment for the original interior panel directly under that window regulator. That had to go. At first I cut one side and I was just going to flatten it out in case someday I wanted to put it back. However, it was clear that that was not going to be sufficient, and so I had to go ahead and remove it completely. I'll prime and paint underneath that before I attach anything else, but you might consider pulling those out if you're going to use this type of panel in your Trans Am race car. Okay, after these have been cut out, I took the time to go around to all the edges, cleaned up all the corners, ground and sanded and filed until there was no sharp edges all the way around that would catch you with your hand or anything like that. Then I measured out where I could place the rivets in areas where the backing of the car was right against the steel. Of course, since it's a pressed piece up against the interior quarter, the rivets won't hold if you just put them anywhere. And so I marked all the places that they could go, then I tried to space them out evenly so that they would look nice. I drilled these with a smaller bit than what I'm going to need. Make sure you use a little piece of rubber hose so your drill doesn't smash into the metal and make a mark. And then I'm gonna take this piece and set it on the other piece and mark the same holes so that both sides will look the same. I know it's a race car, but I try to make it look as even as I can. But that's definitely the next step. I'm waiting on some rivets to get here that are stainless steel that I'll be using, that I'll know the actual size, which I think is 3/16 for the rivet. And I'll re-drill these holes to the larger size, and then it'll be time to prep and paint this panel and prepare it for installation. Before I get serious about attaching the side pieces onto the quarters, I'm going to go ahead and measure out and cut the piece that goes across the back seat area. This is a cardboard piece that's a cardboard divider in a standard Mustang. You can get it from CJ Pony Parts for less than $15, and they ship it for free, even though I'm sure it costs them more than you paid for the item to get it shipped. There's really no reason to deviate much from what the design is for this. Of course, I won't do the top cutouts where the back seat would hang because I've removed those hangers. And I also won't come down any further for the shield than this right here. There's a ridge that runs along in this gap right here. And we're going to butt right up to that gap with the bottom of our shield between the trunk area and the passenger's compartment. We'll get this laid out and cut and decide where we're going to set up for the pop rivets. It's a little hard to see in the video, but you can see I've laid this out and it's been scribed onto the metal. This is the same 18 gauge steel. I found that the piece of backboard that we used for this was not cut in a manner that made it where I could just lay it out and draw it out. It all had to be measured in order to get it to lay straight. So if you're planning on using that for a template, That's gonna turn out to be a little more work than you thought it would. But we'll get this thing cut out and see how it fits and do the trimming as necessary and get ready for some fasteners. Okay, here is the back panel. It's been cut out. I've rounded all the corners so they weren't sharp and taken the edge off. I still have a little prep to do for the panel before we set it in there, but we're gonna put it in there and see how it fits. Well, it's tough to complain about that. It'll sit a little bit higher when I put the pop rivets in it. It's just kind of hanging there and not falling over, but it fills the whole back area. Looks good, looks even, and once we get the holes drilled in it and get it prepped and painted, it'll fit in there just fine and get the job done. The next project we're going to do is to build the package tray. We want to make it as close to the original size as possible so it doesn't interfere with the rubber that attaches the windshield. It kind of tucks under if you've ever put a package tray in one of these cars, so we don't want it to tuck under too far. We also want it to drop about 1 inch inside the car over the back piece to make a nice seam. So we purchased something else from CJ Pony Parts that cost them more to ship than it did to buy. These are about 11 bucks, just a standard package tray. When I was laying this out, I realized that there's a slight curvature in the tray. It's not but about 1/4 inch, but we wanted a 1 inch drop. So what we did was we measured the 1 inch right here in the middle. That's exactly 1 inch. And then there's a slight curvature that goes across to both ends. So I think what we're going to do is cut a little chunk out of the center here. I've got a buddy with a metal brake, and we're going to break each of these one at a time. They get a little closer to the curvature when we put that in there. Now it's a race car, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we want it to look as good as it can look. So I think that's the best way to go about it. That's all taped and marked. Now we're going to cut that out and maybe run it over to the metal brake today or tomorrow and get that done. Of course, this will be our final piece to mark and cut. And then we're going to be on to cleaning these pieces, getting them prepped for installation and painted and whatnot. Okay, we're all back from powder coat, and we started on one of the panels. It's already installed. This one fit perfectly, just the way that I had cut it out. And I thought that I had trimmed them both to fit exactly, but we came over to do this side, and it didn't want to fit quite as well as it should have, but we did a little bit of trimming on the back side where it didn't show. Touched that up so it wouldn't rust, and got that one installed. Now we're about ready to do the back panel and the package tray. You can see these little pieces of foam that I'm putting along each panel in some of the raised areas. It's not so much that the panel needs to float as much as I'm trying to create a barrier that will keep them from vibrating against one another. This car is going to be really loud, and it's going to be really vibrating inside anyway, and hopefully this will tame some of that. But we're getting them installed one at a time. We got the back panel installed. However, where the bottom rivets go in, there's a belly pan back there that makes it all double thick and won't let the long rivets that I'm using work, so I'll have to buy some shorter ones for that one. But starting to look pretty solid. Okay, all panels are in. I bought 100 of these black rivets, and that wasn't enough, so I'm missing a few. And I've got to get some shorter ones for the bottom where you can see the open holes. But everything else came out okay. So that was a lot of measuring and cutting and trimming and powder coating and pop riveting, but it all came out exactly like I wanted it to, so I'm pretty happy with it. So like I said at the beginning, I couldn't find any videos about this type of thing. This might give you some good ideas to do a rear seat delete if you're doing a Trans Am car or some sort of race car out of a Mustang or any other car. It's not difficult work, but it is kind of tedious, and I wish you the best of luck on whatever you're building.